All right, let's bring in Stephen Henderson of American Black Journal and Nolan Finley of the Detroit News for a look at what's being discussed in Lansing. It's great to see you guys. Happy
Good to
summer.
be here.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
All right, so let's go ahead and give me a sense of where things stand about conversations about expanding Elliott Larsen, Nolan.
Well, I mean, in the legislature, I think, their attitude is we created this law, we passed this law. If the law gets amended, it's going to have to go through us. And I think they're right in that regard. The hang up there is you have a lot of folks worried about what happens to religious freedom, what happens to religious groups, particularly the Catholic Church, and will they be exempted from certain provisions? And until they can come to some sort of agreement on religious freedom, I don't think it's going anywhere.
What do you think, Steve?
So I actually had a conversation with some of the advocates about this, and I think what may be taking shape is kind of a compromise that deals with the different parts of the law. I mean, Elliott Larsen does a lot of different things, and some of them there is no disagreement on. Nobody believes, I don't think, that you ought to be able to discriminate against people in housing. Nobody believes you ought to be fired from your job for these things. The real contention is about public accommodations, right? And the bathroom question that keeps coming up. That's where you get conservative legislators dropping off. And so one way to deal with this might be to deal with housing and deal with employment, because those should be no-brainers, and that gets you a little further down the road. And then perhaps you can talk about how to deal with public accommodation. But Republicans would have to be willing to do that, and advocates would have to be willing to give up the public accommodation thing for now.
The advocates have been very reluctant to let any piece go. It's been all or nothing. I mean, they had a deal on gay and lesbian rights a couple of years ago, and because it didn't include transgendered, the deal blew up.
Well, I think that was
so
actually
there's
a good
not
stand.
much of a mood for piecemeal approaches on this. Get what we can today, get the rest tomorrow. There's not been much of a mood for that.
But at the same time, you're having conversations that are happening around the budget and around Line 5 right now. So it feels like there's a lot of different pieces that are happening. What can you tell us about what's happening with Line 5, Stephen?
I don't know that that's close to resolution either. I mean, you've got the Attorney General.
We're rolling towards a deadline,
who is saying,
though.
look, I'm going to act if you don't, but that doesn't seem to have scared the legislature into doing anything, and so I think we're going to end up with this kind of showdown, which will be a court showdown. I mean, she can't just do it. She'll issue an order to do it, and somebody will try to stop her. Will play out there. But while that happens, I think it actually makes it less likely that we get a legislative deal while that court action takes place.
Well, I'm not sure the deal's in the legislature. The deal's between Enbridge and the governor.
Right.
I think there's some willingness to compromise, or there was on the company's part. They went from a 7 to 10 year timetable to a 5-year timetable. But when Governor Whitmer threw the 2-year timetable out there for shutting it down, I mean, that's just absurd, physically impossible. You got to give them something they can actually work within.
I think it's interesting that Enbridge has kind of taken their argument to the people, and whereas every time you open up a newspaper, whether it's the Free Press or the Detroit News, you see full-page ads from Enbridge explaining this is what we're trying to do. Well, it helps the revenue, paying your salary, but trying to explain to people this is what our plan is, and this is what we intend to do.
And that's good, because there has been misinformation out there, and people need to understand what the choices are. This pipeline is not simply an optional thing. It serves a critical role in our energy infrastructure. It delivers a lot of fuel. So if we shut that down, then what? And I think that question is legitimate.
That is a very reasonable question, and figuring that out and how much it'll cost should be part of the equation. It's good to see Enbridge at least indulging that conversation now, because for years what they were saying is, no, we don't want to do it. And it's safe.
And we're fine, and it's safe.
Right. And trust us that it's safe, because we do the inspections and all this sort of stuff. We're in a better space now, at least in the way that we're talking about this.
And the alliances they're forming are kind of interesting. The labor union is putting a lot of pressure on the governor, because that is a huge infrastructure job in a part of the state that doesn't have many infrastructure jobs.
All right, speaking of infrastructure, before we leave kind of what's going on in Lansing, what's the word on roads? What's the word on any kind of deal?
I thought that Democratic proposal, that Democratic from the House Democrats, was fascinating, because it was well short of what Governor Whitmer, their own governor, wanted. It's closer to where the Republicans are in terms of dollar amounts, and it's completely unrealistic in terms of where the money's going to come from. But the fact that they didn't come anywhere near 2.5 billion tells me that target number is dead.
That people don't agree on that's what you need, or just saying we're never going to be able to get there in one.
No appetite for it.
So the polls have told us a lot about how people feel about that, and they're not in favor. Now, I happen to think that this is not a popularity contest, that the number is agreed upon by everyone who's looked at this and studied it and said, this is what you need.
Yeah, you may not like it, but that's...
If you don't like it, then continue to bump around on the roads and spend $1,700 a year fixing your car.
But if you're a politician who's got to face the voters in 2020,
how do you do that, right?
You're looking at those numbers saying 80% against.
Yeah, they're very lopsided, and I have to say that I have not felt like the governor who put that number out there has done enough of the retail side of selling it to people. If you were going to come up with a number that big, you needed to have a really concrete strategy about moving public opinion behind it, and she's done the same thing that past governors have done, which is the right thing, and explaining why and what will be done with the money. But she's asking for so much more than anyone else did.
She's dead right on where the money should come from. It should come from users.
Yeah, right.
And that's what her proposal does. But the Democratic caucus in the House put out a proposal that completely diverts from that.
Yeah.
It's not paid for by the
Yeah.
users. And so I don't know where you come to agreement. You've got the House Democrats, House Republicans, and the governor all in different places.
Spaces, yeah.
All right, well, 1 minute left. Golf coming to town here this weekend.
here.
Yeah, PJ's here.
I've been doing my radio show from every morning from the
That's a tough
the
job,
course.
Nolan.
Oh,
Twist
man.
your arm,
It's
right?
absolutely beautiful out there. They have done a remarkable job both on the course and in the neighborhoods around in terms of mowing, sprucing things up.
Yeah, and it's, to have it here when we used to have the Buick Open, and I used to go to the Buick Open. I worked in Flint, and it was a great event. But to have it here,
It's a big
different
deal.
feel,
It's in my neighborhood, so it's a little disruptive, I gotta say.
Oh,
the traffic, and they got all these things blocked off. I'm complaining a little, but it is cool to have something like that in the city. It's an unusual event for Detroit, in the neighborhoods, right? And these are some of the city's sort of premier neighborhoods as well, so we get to show off the big houses in Palmer Woods and that sort of thing, and along the golf course, so it's a win.
All right, well, sounds good. All right, thanks, guys.